Hey YouTube, welcome back to another History Teacher Reacts video with Mr. Terry. Today we are going to watch the video that was voted on by our patrons on this week's Patrons Pick Poll. And they chose this one. This is the Schwerer Gustav, okay, Rail Super Gun by Simple History. So this giant weapon that you can see in their opening frame here was something I had heard about, and I'd actually seen pictures of. But it's basically gone down as like meme worthy as this giant gun that doesn't seem to have been something like efficient and barely used at all. But maybe more just a sign of military force than anything else, because as you can look and see, it may not be an efficient type of thing. It would have taken a lot of work to build and all that stuff. But as far as its use, I did not know much about what in what engagements might actually it have been used and more of its purpose and all that stuff. So I'm glad to have this because I wanted to know more about it, because it is kind of a unique thing that I've heard about with World War II. So we're going to check this out now. If you would like to vote in polls, you can become a patron member. Go down below. You'll see the link to Patreon, and all people that are members there, all pledgers, get the ability to vote in polls there. So one other shout out or thing I want to make you aware of is my new gaming channel. So I do a lot of game streams, if you have noticed, and I'm going to be transitioning to a gaming specific channel. There's a link down below, or just search on YouTube for Mr. Terry Gaming, and you can get involved over there. Okay, awesome. Let's go ahead and get started.
The Schwerer Gustav, Rail Supergun, World War II. The Schwerer Gustav was the largest artillery gun ever made. Before the Second World War had started, Hitler required a devastating weapon for the invasion of France that could destroy the Maginot Line, penetrating its several layers of concrete and steel.
That would make sense, because the Maginot Line is basically the greatest defensive fortification ever used. Now, we all know the problem with it is it didn't extend far enough. It only went on basically the border between Germany and France, but as we know, the famous thing is that the Germans went around it, which they went around through Belgium, like they did in World War I too, so it was largely avoided. But that would make sense because it was so defended and had, these cement bunkers in the hills and all over the place. It probably would have required a crazy powerful artillery weapon with huge shells and probably a long distance to have any effect on it.
The Schwerer Gustav was designed in 1934 by the German arms manufacturer Krupp. This giant railway gun weighed 1,350 tons and had an overall length of 47.3 meters, or 155 feet 2 inches.
It's like a small battleship on land, pretty much. But even notice this said railgun. You couldn't drive this thing on like roads. It wouldn't have to happen. To move something like this, it would have to be on rails, which is called a railgun. You would have to pretty much design a train track for it. So it would not have been very mobile at all, making it hard, potentially it could be very hard to use.
It was mounted on a railway chassis running on specially constructed tracks and had to be disassembled and assembled to set up. Even a set of outer tracks were required for the cranes to achieve this. Its barrel length was 32.5.
So you couldn't even move it necessarily in its entirety, even with the rails. Okay, so the barrel, let's look at the dimensions.
Tracks were required for the cranes to achieve this. Its barrel length was 32.5 meters, or 106 feet 8 inches, and could only move up or down at an elevation of 48 degrees, with horizontal targeting achieved via curved tracks. The weapon caliber was 80 centimeters, or 31 inches, and the heavy concrete
31-inch caliber. It's like shooting a Volkswagen.
Piercing or high explosive shells weighed 7 tons, making them the largest and heaviest shells of any artillery piece in the world. The gun could fire over a range of 47 kilometers, or 29 miles. After a number of shells...
27 miles. You couldn't be accurate. There's no way you could be accurate at something like that. I mean, that mostly shows its velocity. I don't know if you'd actually be shooting at something that far. I mean, it would make a big impact as far as psychologically. You have this thing launching at you way beyond where you could even see.
Fired, the barrel would wear away and need replacing. The artillery gun required a staggering number of crew, 250 crewmen were required to assemble the gun, which took 3.5 days, while 2,500 crewmen were needed to lay the tracks. Flak battalions were also a necessity to protect the gun from air attacks, as it was highly visible due to its size.
Yeah, you need it's like you need a small army just to maintain it. You can start to see why this thing is not an efficient weapon and not something you really want to use.
Schwerer Gustav would be constructed throughout the 30s, but it would not enter service until 1941, therefore missing the French invasion. The gun would be transported to the Eastern Front and used at the siege of Sevastopol, where 4,000 men were required to set it up in position.
So they had to move it all the way, basically, to the Russian front. I bet that was such an arduous process to do that. What impact did it have?
Fired 300 shells at several enemy positions, including Soviet fortresses and ammunition magazines. After this, the Schwerer Gustav was transported to Leningrad, but the attack was cancelled. It is unknown whether there was a second gun constructed, or whether it was a nickname by the German artillery crew, but in 1942, Dora, as it became known, was operational at Stalingrad, but withdrawn by the Germans. During 1942, the Germans proposed to construct a new version of the gun, mounted on a self-propelled platform that could move without railway tracks, called the Land Cruiser P-1500 Monster. However, the idea was eventually scrapped.
I mean, resources by the end were hard, and the efficiency factor would have to make up for, I don't know, so much using of those resources rather for something else. I mean, by the end of the war, resources are so scarce. This thing would need to be very efficient to build something even more complicated than the first one there.
As the war was coming to an end, the Schwerer Gustav, some sources say, was destroyed by the Germans to prevent capture on the 14th of April 1945, and its ruins studied by Soviet specialists.
Yeah, that's a common thing. You destroy your stuff when you get captured, so you can't be used against you.
Schwerer Gustav was quite an impractical weapon, demanding a large number of crew and setup to become operational. Subscribe for more World War II videos. Get your copy of Simple History World War II today.
Oh, that's a cool poster. Or cool, image there.
Thank you guys for all your support on the Simple History YouTube channel. If you enjoy it, please consider visiting our Patreon page. There, you can show us your support for the channel by donating and make a huge difference in what we're able to create for you. Plus, you can get early access on upcoming videos. So let's keep it growing, and thank you for being part of this amazing community.
All right, that was great. Yeah, I heard a little more than I had known before about it. I mean, same thing as what I was under the impression of as an extremely inefficient weapon, not really that useful, but interesting kind of feat of engineering anyways to have something like that. And they're saying it's the largest artillery ever built, so, I mean, nobody's ever, I guess, built upon that, you know what I mean? It's just not an efficient thing. Now it's like with that kind of effect that you would need from such a long range thing. Usually you do that by air these days, and or just make more smaller, more efficient things that can get the job pretty much done. But it is an interesting thing to see, especially with coming out of World War II Germany, where they were trying to be very innovative, and that was something they tried to pride themselves on, was that technological thing, and they were technologically advanced. I mean, going into World War II, I mean, they were on another level than other people. I mean, while a lot of people were still fighting with World War I era technology and tactics, the Germans had completely passed that and basically entered a brand new era with the Blitzkrieg, with their mobile tanks and their air war and things like that put them ahead of everybody, you know, in World War II. And it took years of catching up to be, and them depleting their resources for that to change with that there. So that was great. Short and sweet. Got the job done. Again, another little interesting piece of history there that you can to look at, and that'll be fun. I'll use some of that knowledge in my classroom as we talk about it. I love talking about little side things like this that are just kind of interesting and, you know, can get people hooked that way. So awesome. All right. Again, this video was voted on by our patrons. If you'd like to join Patreon, go down below. There's a link to that. My gaming channel is down there. Teespring account, if you're especially into World War II and you're into gaming, maybe check out our Mario Kart themed World War II merch that we got down below from Teespring. Really cool. It's for a limited time, and I think you really enjoy it. Okay. With that, thank you for being a part of this. Thank you for being a part of history education here on YouTube, and we'll see you all next time.